Everybody's always asking a lot of questions about pens for their Mustangs, so I'm just going to do a quick overview of different options for you and why they're important. The best, if you can afford it, is 6-foot heavy-duty Mustang panels. Try to get the ones that don't have the fasteners where they link together, spot welded onto the side. Instead, get butterfly clamps, and this goes for all metal panels. When you put them on, when they hold the panels together, they're never going to come apart. If you have panels that have the spot welded on fasteners, there's still a safety measure you can add to it. Get a little bit of chain with a fastener on the end, wrap it around, cut it to the right length, and fasten it. You could even put a small bolt through there. That'll give you a little extra protection. Hold it all together. If you do not have 6-foot tall panels, heavy duty, these things are well over 200 bucks a piece. You can go and get your average everyday cheap ass panels. They work just as fine. The 5-footers are cheap. You can get them for about 80 bucks a piece on sale. The key with them is they're only 5 feet. You'll see a lot of people will put the 5-foot panels and then put a 2x4 extended on the top to make the 6-foot requirement. That's a 6-foot requirement, but nothing says I can get through that to a Mustang like seeing a solid panel with a single wooden 2x4 on the top. So that's not the best route to go. Even if you do a 2x10 up on top, the issue is the Mustang will look at it. If it's going to decide to jump, which it almost never will, it'll look at it, it'll see the difference up there than from the panel down below, and it'll be attracted to the weaker looking area. So the alternative to using a 5-foot panel with an extension on the top is to set up your pen, find out exactly where everything's going to be, and then put a wooden post in the ground. With the wooden post in the ground, you basically use your same butterfly clamp to hold it all together. Except when you put your panel together, instead of using the bolt that goes through into the wooden to hold it like that, you get a Spax bolt. And these things are engineered at Home Depot. This is a larger one. You can get them smaller. This goes through right into the wooden post. It'll hold your panels up at 6 feet. And you'll have a gap underneath, but it doesn't really matter unless they have a pole with them. So that gets the solid panel, 5-foot panel, up to 6 feet. Very visually not appealing to a Mustang if they see that. They're not going to jump over it. They shouldn't be jumping it over anyway. If you have dented panels and bent panels, chances are you put way too much pressure on your Mustang. A Mustang will not want to jump a panel fence at all. A Mustang from the wild, generally speaking, will respect a 4-foot barbed wire fence. For safety reasons, obviously, that's not allowed, but they live with them in the wild. They know they're there. They know about them. I've watched the BLM pick up some strays that had some Mustangs in it, and we put them in a branding pen. We're able to chase them into just a 4-foot branding pen. The BLM was still able to back their truck up and get the horses loaded up, including couple of the wild ones, even though it was a 4-foot pen, just with barbed wire. So Mustangs will respect fencing. You don't want weak parts. You don't want to have a gate going into your pen that looks different than the rest if you can avoid it, because that will look like a weak part. If a Mustang's jumping your pen, they're only trying to do it for one reason. It's the last tool in their chest, and that's what they're going to try. Even if you're putting mild pressure on them, they realize what you're trying to get them to do. They realize what you want them to do. And a few of them, and it doesn't necessarily mean the crazy ones, a few of them will pull that one tool out of their chest and consider trying to jump out of the pen. I've only had it happen twice. Once was a mare, she skimmed off the side. It was a proper 6-foot pen. She had no pressure on her. It was just the last tool in her shed rather than get loaded on the trailer, and she decided to try to go up over the pen. Other than that, I've never had one try to go through a pen. I have had a mare, and she's over there right now, and when we were loading her in a chute into a trailer with the doors wide open, a big 3-horse trailer, the owner at the time was using a Polaris Ranger to push her down the aisleway, and that left a 3-inch gap between the rails and the Polaris Ranger. That mare, rather than go into that trailer, after she thought about it for a while, took one look at that 8-inch gap, went running over, tried to fit through it, ended up climbing over the rails, climbing over the whole Polaris Ranger to get past it. So there is a chance that they will do something like that. It is very slim, but it'll depend on the horse, and it'll depend on the kind of pressure you put on him. If you can get big panels like this, perfect. Make sure they're fastened together securely, and even if you can't get a wooden post, putting a metal T-post in the ground where they meet, and then wrapping it with rope so that the T-post won't flip out or push out if they hit it. Wrap it a bunch of times around with rope and tie it tight, boom, that's as strong as it needs to be. You can also hold your metal panels up on a wooden post using the same method if you don't want to spend the money on hardware. Have somebody hold the panel up, wrap it with rope, go around 2 or 3 times, tie it off, it will stay up, and the friction will hold it onto the post at the right height. The other thing you can do and to consider is on the bottom rails. You might have the odd one that will lean out and run around a little bit too much and kick a foot through there. If they kick a foot through and there's no board there and they hit a post, they can hurt themselves. If you can put some solid covering on the bottom, maybe 1.5 to 2 feet, that really will help out. It'll make things a lot safer. If you got sand in your round pen, it helps keep the sand in too. If you're doing a wooden pen, these pressure treated ones that I used on the bottom I got from tearing down somebody's deck. So you can just salvage the lumber for that. You don't have to spend it. This pen was built 13 years ago. It's never had any treatments on it. Give it a pressure wash about every 5 years. I might stain it now, might not, haven't decided. One thing to keep in mind is the different options to fasten your boards. Spax bolts. They're engineered, they replace this one bolt. Actually, no. This size replaces this size of the old galvanized types. You can use nails, you can use screws, but then you're constantly going to be dealing with your boards mucking up. These, when they go in, will, oh wonderful. These, when they go in, will cinch down and hold the board tight, and after the wood shrinks a year, 2 years later, you can tighten them up even more. They also just come right out too. So if you make changes in the future, these things are reusable. They're like gold around the ranch having these things. When you do your top rails, it's 2x6 and another 2x6. You tee them up like this and it makes it 10 times stronger. If something hits that, that's like an I-beam. They're not going to go through it. These are 8-inch boards is what the BLM used to recommend. I don't know if they still go 8-inch. Do something like this, put a couple screws in there, there, and there, and this thing will be so strong, they'll never crush through it. You don't have to treat your boards. Depending on lumber, when I built this, an 8-foot section cost me $56. I think with the cost of lumber now, it spiked, so it's probably going to be $110. Still economical. If you use a good 5 to 6 inch posts, you got to make sure your posts are in the ground. 1/3 of the length of that post is in the ground. So if you got 6 feet up top, you want at least 3 feet in the ground. You want an undisturbed hole, which means you want to do the hole as small as possible. So get an auger, and drill the hole and keep it as small as possible, and then pack it with crushed rock or sand mix, rock sand mix as you backfill the hole. Pack it in, and that's all you have to do. I recommend not using concrete. Concrete just keeps the pole wrapped up, so when it gets wet, it wicks the water down in there and the pole will rot out. Everybody's seen a concrete post rot out right where it goes into the concrete. If you pack the soil in there, that's almost better than concrete. It allows the wood to breathe. It'll last 100 times longer. Pressure treated post in the ground should last you probably 20 years easy, especially a 6-inch one. You can do a 3 to 4 inch one if you wanted. As long as they're 8 feet apart, it's not the end of the world. But at the time, I do believe the BLM, and they might still recommend on a wood fence that it's a 5 to 6 inch post. If you are doing a hybrid system and you're attaching onto your barn, there's all kinds of options. Using the same Spax bolts, you get these clamps. They're mostly, the heavy duty ones are mostly for electrical applications. You get them at Home Depot. You put your metal panel up, put this on, a couple Spax bolts through, that's never coming off. So you could use part of your building as part of your pen, especially if you have a stall. You can use part of the stall as part of your pen and just save you a lot of time and effort, and then you just keep them in the one spot. This area here, I use these metal panels now mostly for flexibility. The mare that I'm dealing with now, she's very reactive. I don't want her to have too much room to move around. So I work her in the smaller panel area, keeps her closer, keeps her more engaged. This pen here is 40 feet, and it can be a little much. If they don't want to have anything to do with you, you risk the problem of moving them too much, and all you're really doing is teaching them to run away from you is all you can do. Smaller, more intimate, they'll focus a little bit more on you. But as far as the panels are concerned, even on your metal panels, you can still have a solid boards across the bottom. If you get 2x8 or 4x4, 4x8 plywood, cut it in 2-foot sections, you can get these, and they'll hold it onto the panel. It's the same electrical connections, but it's only got the one side. So what you do is you put your panel up, plywood panel up, these go on the back side. They're very sturdy. They will hold the plywood up solid to the panel. And then you use a carriage bolt through the plywood to hold them on. It only takes a couple of them to hold the panel on, so it's really not that much work, and it gives you a lot of give there if they decide they're going to put a leg through there. The other thing you can do with a 5-foot metal panel is you can put a 2x12 down on the bottom. Once again, even if you're using panels, use wooden posts if you can. Put the post in the ground, put the 2x4 or 2x12 on the bottom, put the panel on top of the 2x12. Same thing, it'll raise it up to 6 feet, and just make sure it's all fastened to your post. Once again, it'll keep your sand in and stuff. What you use depends on mostly how you're going to do it. If you're just gentling your Mustang and it's your first one and you're probably not going to do a lot more, you will though, you could just stick with the metal. If you wanted something more permanent, we needed this was swamp area, we need to reclaim it. That's why we decided to do the big round pen, do it out of wood. It was permanent, we weren't going to move it, we weren't going to make any changes. It just made sense to do it out of wood. If you can afford metal panels, the flexibility is incredible. When you're done with them, there's always something else you can use them for. So the best money you can spend, unless you want infrastructure for your farm, is metal panels. And they don't have to be the expensive ones at all. The only other thing to consider is the pen itself. The reason you're putting the posts in is everything's got to be structurally strong, including at the gate area. The bigger the pen, the more structurally strong it is. If a Mustang rams into that side of the pen and there's no posts in the ground, it can drag the pen over, and then the panels keel and everything just kind of collapses. On a big heavy duty panel like this, it's only going to move in a bit, it's not as important. But if you're using lightweight panels, it's important to have a post, T-post, whatever it is in the ground holding it, so it doesn't move and doesn't slide when they hit it. You want it solid. Even a T-post in there, when they hit it, it's going to move from the bottom, and that's going to stop it from going sideways. It might bend over a little bit, but generally speaking, it'll stop it from going sideways. So that's basically it for panels. I'll do another video that explains why I prefer a square. This is a little bit more octagon, but why I prefer a small square panel. You'll hear a lot about Mustangs. You don't want them to go have a corner to hide in. I found that every Mustang, when you put them in a pen, they'll have a favorite corner if it's a square pen. Even on a round pen, they'll have a place that they feel comfortable. You got to take advantage of that and use that as their new comfort spot. So when you're working them, if they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing, you want to stop them. You're just the early stages, just getting to control their feet. You stop them in that specific area that you know they're comfortable at, and it's like a huge release for them compared to just stopping anywhere. It's a way you can give them a release early in the stages. Later on, when you're touching them and you're getting your hands on them, you'll find that maybe rubbing the forehead, rubbing the neck gives them that release, and you can switch to that. But till you get to that point, when they're doing good and everything's going good, if they have a favorite corner and you finish and start from that favorite corner, that's like a release for them. If they do something good, they're doing what they're supposed to do, you might even just go up and touch them for the first time. Let them go back to that corner and just have the release in that corner. It's just a simple little thing that in the early stages. That's where a square pen works out. The corners can work in your favor in that conditions. It's going to always depend on how you're going to gentle them. If you're going to gentle in a round pen, you better have your timing sharp. You're going to have to pick up on every cue, because for every one you miss, you're wasting time, and you're wasting the opportunity to teach them something. Square pen, a little bit more forgiving. You might not want to. I've had a couple that were just marathon runners. I stopped putting pressure on them in this pen. I just stopped putting all pressure And that guy just ran around. He had this beautiful stride. He just set into it, and he ran around with no pressure at all. As long as I was in the pen, he just did his trot. No matter how many direction changes, no matter how much I did, he outwore me. I was beat up, and he was still going. As soon as I got him in a square pen, made all the difference in the world. He had an out. He had a mental out by running around. Possibly could have made better progress with better timing, this, that, and the other thing, but it was a tremendous amount of work, and it probably wasn't worth it at the time. In hindsight, square panel, much better. And that's basically it. 5-foot panels, put them up on a 2x12, fasten them to the post. If you don't want to put the 2x12s down the bottom, because that is rather expensive, just put them up on a post. A wooden post is all you got to do. Raise them up to 5 feet or to 6 feet on the post using these clamps. I think I went through all the different clamps. Farm supply store has more expensive, more heavy duty clamps. Probably have to get these for the bigger panels. These are the other ones that they should have. These are basically for galvanized posts for chain link fencing and stuff like that. They work just ducky for Mustang panels also. And I think that's about it. Spax bolts, tons and tons of Spax bolts. These things, the bigger ones are like 70 cents. The smaller ones are only about 40. But the thing is that they cinch down really good, and that'll hold it all together. Anyway, that's the little talk about panels.